Good evening, everybody. We are live.
I believe that we're just waiting for the mayor to log back in. He was having microphone difficulties from what I understand. So let's give him a moment. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I just received a call from the mayor. He's trying to figure out his technical issues, so I'm going to go ahead and start the meeting.
Recording in progress.
Mr. Harvey, are we ready to rock here?
Yes, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, we are recording. If you'd like to initiate your call to order, we're ready to begin.
Okay, I hereby call this meeting to order. And I believe we need to have a roll call vote for the council members.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Smith?
Here.
Council members Emilio,
Here.
Coletti,
Here.
McAdams,
Here.
Peduri,
Here.
and Tomlinson.
Here.
Thank
Mayor
you.
Peak?
Sorry, did I?
Okay.
Go ahead, Sandra. What did you have something?
I just wanted to make sure that Mayor Peak was not present. I don't see him, so.
Point of order. Can we postpone or delay the start of the meeting until the mayor is able to log in?
I've actually talked to the mayor and we're going to proceed.
Has he sent out, you've spoken with him directly and he told you to proceed?
Councilmember Coletti, please do not have crosstalk during this meeting.
It's a point of order and I asked you a question.
And I've already answered it.
So you spoke with him directly?
I did. Please
Okay.
stop the crosstalk now.
Thank you.
Now we'll lead you in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll now move on to approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda, Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilmember, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Call for the vote. Sandra, would you please take the
Thank you.
approval?
Councilmember Emilio,
Yes.
Councilmember McAdams,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson, Councilmember Peduri.
Aye.
Thank you, Councilmember Tomlinson and Councilmember Peduri, and Councilmember Coletti.
Aye.
Mayor Peak, still not present. Motion carries 6-0-1 with Mayor Peak absent for this vote.
Thank you. Mr. Harvey, do we have any presentations this evening?
No, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, we do not tonight.
Okay, moving on to council and staff announcements. Do we have a report on closed session tonight?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, the closed session that had been calendared was canceled and not held. Therefore, there's no report.
Thank you. And Mr. Harvey, do you have any staff announcements at this time?
Yes, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, we do have one staff announcement that I'm aware of. If I could ask Ms. Francis to please have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Francis.
Good evening, council members, staff, and our community. The first weekend, Tuesday, August 3rd, we will be hosting National Night Out from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. at Caledonia Park. We'll have a variety of local public safety agencies participating, as well as a variety of community groups and nonprofits. In addition to city departments, we'll have food, music, and it'll be an opportunity to positively interact with our community and share information with them. If you have any questions, you would like to participate, feel free to reach out to me at the police department. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Francis. I see that the mayor is here and present for item 4, general public comments. So I'll go ahead and turn it back over to the mayor.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem Smith. I see Councilmember McAdams' hand up.
Yes, I had a council announcement when staff was done.
Please.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Smith, for jumping in there and starting the meeting off. I wanted to let the public know that 2 of our Pacific Grove High School students have joined the Her Drive mission. Her Drive was founded by students in June of 2020 to support individuals that lack access to basic hygiene necessities and feminine products. There are some collection boxes for gently used bras, menstrual care products, and hygiene products located at Captain and Stoker, and also the Starbucks on Lighthouse Avenue. On July 29th, these two young ladies will be doing a drive at PG High School from noon to 2 p.m. And the items collected will be donated to Community Human Services, Community Partnership for Youth, the YWCA Domestic Violence Safe House, the Home Resource Center, and Al and Friends. If you'd like more information, you can go to herdrive.org. Thank you.
Councilmember Fedorov.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to personally thank, first of all, everyone that applied to be part of the task force for diversity, equity, and inclusion. The council approved a diverse set of individuals, Amy Bowie, Edward Horace, Nadia Mark, Christy Markowitz, and Tina Rao to lead this task force. As an update to that item, the inaugural meeting of the newly created task force is scheduled for Monday, August 16th at 5 p.m. Future meetings will actually be decided by the task force itself. I encourage everyone to attend the meeting if your time permits. Thank you.
Councilmember Emilio.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended Lucy's grand opening with yourself, Mayor, and it was real positive. Also wanted to mention the motocross, downtown motocross. There's over 300 bikes there, and I was there for quite a few hours, and it was very well done. I want to compliment to everybody on that.
We have a few city committee meetings coming up tomorrow. The Recreation Board is meeting at 4 p.m. And next Tuesday, the Traffic Safety Commission, followed by Wednesday, the Library Board and the Historic Resources Committee are meeting. And now we'll go on without any further council announcements. We'll move on to general public comment. Ms. Kendall, do we have any of the public wishing to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. I see no hands raised at the moment, but we might want to give it a few seconds to see if there's a delay.
That sounds good.
No hands raised.
Okay, then let's move on to the consent agenda. Do any council members wish to pull an item from the consent agenda? Councilmember McAdams.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I would like to pull 8D like dog and 9A like apple.
Councilmember Coletti.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, 8D, status of sales tax increase, implementation options, and including litigation elections.
Okay, does any member of the public wish to pull it? We have 2 items pulled. Anyone from the public wishing to pull another item?
I do see a hand raised. Lisa Ciani, you have the floor.
Okay, there's the unmute. I'd like to pull 7A, Architectural Review Board membership.
All right, thank you. All right, let's move 8D to 12A. And in keeping with past tradition, let's hear 9A, local emergency actions. Mr. Harvey, if you would give us that item right following the consent agenda. And then 7A, the Architectural Review Board. And let's put that as That would be under, well,
Public hearing, Mr. Mayor.
public hearing, that would be 11E. E as in eagle. Okay, I'll just quickly summarize what we've just done. We've approved minutes from the special and regular meetings of council on July 7th. We've introduced and, we've received reports from Mary Lagaska. Thank you very much. Check register report and a core revenue status report. Councilmember Joe Emilio provided the Monterey Salinas Transit Board minutes, and we received the minutes from the Historic Resource Committee meeting in January. Thank you, Ms. Hunter. And now we'll go to item 9A, local emergency actions. Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a report on this item this evening. I've left this item on the agenda for a couple reasons. One, up until last week, we were not completely certain that we actually had received the ARPA funds, and I did not want to do anything that might, for whatever reason, jeopardize that. And secondly, there's been a lot of flux with the variants out there, and I just, in an abundance of caution, felt that it should remain if the council should wish to speak on any matter related to the pandemic. And finally, I want to continue my work with the city attorney's office to develop a comprehensive list just to make sure that if we do decide to end the local emergency, we make sure we know what exactly we need to do definitively. And that's the end of my report, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on this item?
I see no hands raised for public comment, Mr. Mayor.
We'll bring it back to council. Councilmember McAdams.
Thank you, Mayor. I pulled this item as the Delta variant has been confirmed in Monterey County. CHOMP released a statement regarding an uptick in both COVID-19 cases and hospitalizations they have seen in the last 2 weeks. And also our Monterey County Health Officer, Dr. Moreno, in collaborations with Santa Cruz and Napa counties, they issued a joint statement recommending wearing face coverings indoors, regardless of vaccine status. So for me, I just really would encourage, I know that it's frustrating, and I know that, 73% of Pacific Grove residents are vaccinated, and we have been doing everything that we can. But unfortunately, we need to be doing more because the last thing that we want to see are either limited activities or perhaps another shutdown. I also wanted to make sure that everyone is aware that children under 12 are not able to get vaccinated. And so for me, as a parent with young children, this is a real concern of mine. Not only because of course, I don't want to see any children getting sick, but also because in-person school is scheduled to start in August. And for me, it is absolutely imperative to see the children of our community return to their classrooms in person full time. So if you have not done so already, please get vaccinated. The vaccine is safe, free, accessible, and effective. And of course, if you have any questions or concerns, or you are curious where to get the vaccine, feel free to send me an email or reach out to our city clerk. Thank you.
Do we have any other council member wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none, this is a report out, so no action required. We'll move on to item 11A, quarterly city manager spending authority expenditure reports. Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have returned here to council following council direction to make a modification to the Pacific Grove Municipal Code to require a quarterly report out of those items purchased, expended within the city manager spending authority, which is currently just shy of $40,000. So again, we are just following up a council direction. We have made simple modification to the code, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on this item?
I see no hands. Yes, we do. Inga Lawrenson-Doimer, you have the floor.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this needs fleshing out a little more, to tell you the truth. I would welcome quarterly reports, and we would actually be able to see where all that money goes. But I think it needs fleshing out by council a little more as far as direction goes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
I see no other hands raised, Mr. Mayor.
All right, we'll bring it back to council then. Any council member comments? Council member McAdams.
Thank you, Mayor. I initially brought this agenda item to council, so thank you to our city manager for bringing this back promptly. I did want to read a portion of the Spending Authority Code to make sure that staff, council, and the public are aware that this exists. And this is 2.16.420, splitting projects. And I quote, "No undertaking involving amounts in excess of the maximum amount for which the purchasing agent is authorized, as specified in Article 2 of this chapter, shall be split into parts for the purpose of avoiding the provisions and restrictions of this article." You know, so for me, that's really important that that be followed, because what that is saying is that, you know, per project, the city manager has, I believe it's almost $41,000 total. And so that would be for construction project or for an issue like cannabis or any sort of, parklets, et cetera. So I think that it's important that we all know that. And the purpose of that is so, we have in our municipal code, we have a very outlined and strict process regarding bids and requests for proposals, just like all municipalities in the state of California. And so, I think that that this is important, that we're aware of, and that, we move away from, spending $39,000 here and then $29,000, the next week or the next month on the same project. And also for budgeting purposes and accountability, it's important that we are aware of what is going on. I have 3 small edits that I would like to include and propose. So the first one is under C, where it says written report, to add and itemized statement. So that way we're not getting like a written executive summary. I would like to see all of the expenditures, itemized. So we know what that's being spent on. That way it's just very clear. The second, under section 5, effective date, it says in accord, Article 15. I think that's supposed to read in accord. You'll have to add ANCE with. So it should be in accordance with. I didn't understand what in accord Article 15. I think that maybe we're missing some language there. And then the second edit, so this, I would like to add below C, I would like to add D or something saying all purchases made under the authority of section 2.16.160 shall be accumulative per subject as per 2.16.420 splitting project. So I would like to, even though it's already in the code, I would like to perhaps reference the splitting projects in this, just to make sure that, there's no going back later that nobody knew. And that's all that I have. I'm happy to submit those few edits to the city clerk if those are acceptable. Thank you.
Councilmember Coletti.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple questions for our financial director. In trying to understand how the purchasing agent and the authorizations work, it's my understanding, Ms. Hannah, that any purchase authorized under this chapter 2.16 is done under the issuance of a purchase order. Is that correct?
We do everything that is over $5,000 on a purchase order. Items that are under $5,000 are not, a purchase order is not created. Does that answer your question on that item?
Yeah, yes, it does.
Okay.
And I was just kind of priming the pump with that. So that being said, it is possible for your staff to generate a report, because really this agenda item boils down to the generation of a report. It's possible for your staff to generate a report of all purchase orders over $5,000, which means, well, let me restate that. All purchase orders under $40,000. And you issue POs that are for any amount over $5,000 and over. Your software can generate a report that would show what the purchase order amount was and what the balance remaining is. Is that correct?
That is correct. One of the challenges that we see with that the particular report, we've been looking at a couple of reports. We have one report that will list all purchase orders issued with the authorized amount of that purchase order. But the other report that Councilmember Coletti is referencing is one that will show all purchase orders that are active with the amount of expenditures against those. If we are producing that report on a quarterly basis, if a purchase order opens in March, or let's say in February, and it closes in March because we've paid that, we've fulfilled the purchase order, then that purchase order will not show up. So there are some challenges that we need to work through, but if that's the direction that council would want to see, that is something that we can try to fulfill.
Okay, thank you. So it would take a little bit of tweaking just because these reports are over a 3-month period and a PO can fall off.
That's true.
Okay, but I'm assuming those tweaks can be made, but I really like the fact that staff can deliver, as part of this proposed ordinance, a report that shows all open purchase orders the amount of the initial purchase order and how much has been paid to date. That's very, that's very useful information. And then of course, the name of the vendor, description, et cetera. That really helps, I believe, achieve the objective of this report. And then also, during our, I think it was back in March, we had a budget workshop, and Ms. Hannah provided us with a overview of contracts over $25,000. And I would like to see that kind of rolled into this report as well. And if it makes sense, if not, perhaps we authorize that as part of some other, but I think the contracts that go into effect as part of this, the spending authority that's authorized through Chapter 216, those should be made available, but also, all the contracts and all the open purchase orders. So I think there's a real possibility to get this information out based on what we, the current financial software, maybe with a few tweaks. So that's really encouraging. I guess the only thing is when the ordinance doesn't specify when the reports would be made available. I know, for instance, the quarterly statements for the treasurer, the charter actually specifies when those would happen. What's your sense, Ms. Hannah, on when these reports would be coming to council? Pretty much the same time?
We would try to incorporate them. I think the best place would be with the rest of the quarterly reports, with the treasurer's report and the workers' comp report. And I think the only one, it would continue to go with that. The one report that may lag is the budget report, which doesn't come out until October just because we're accruing for that period, but we can produce it on the same, it would run the same cycle as our regular quarterly reports, I would say. And just one point of clarification is in relation to the expenditures, a couple of items that would not appear on the purchase order report would be those items that are on credit cards, which are all typically individual purchases under $5,000. And you would not see like things like utility payments or like debt that we've already had an agreement to go into. These would be for like a purchase of a consultant service, purchase of a piece of a good, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. But the bulk of all purchases over 5 and less than 40 are typically done on a purchase order. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Great. Well, I think I think this is good. I think we should move forward. And I just do have one slight typo correction, as it were. On page 2 of the proposed ordinance, on the first sentence at the top of page 2, it says section 2.16160. There's just a dot or a period missing between the 6 and the 1. So for the attention for the city attorney on that one. Thank you very much, Ms. Hannah.
Councilmember McAdams.
Thank you, Mayor. And Ms. Hannah, I have a question for you. When we're talking about splitting, it does really speak to one project. Now, can there be multiple spending authorities used for the same vendor, or is that a cumulative as well?
What we currently process and what is typical is like, say for example, I have information technology and we consult with a particular company on a certain geographical information system project. And later in the year, another department chooses to use that same company maybe for repair of equipment on police vehicles. We would be looking at the cumulative from the standpoint is if it go over for the GIS project, because the other agreement with the vendor would take place for an entirely different purpose. It would be, is it for the same purpose that we keep renewing that contract or go above that spending authority amount?
Okay, and so is there a time, like, do they have to wait 90 days until the city manager can use that spending authority, or could the same vendor be used, sort of back to back to back with the spending authority?
If it were a completely different purpose, and that's something that we would be looking at when we issue the purchase order. There have been some times that we have seen some expenses exceed over the purchase order, and then when we've come to that point, we have brought it back to council or asked the department to bring it back to council for approval when it gets to that point.
So then so with those specific vendors that have, I've heard the term open purchase order, is that because we're not budgeting because we don't know what we will spend with them? Or is it because it's convenient to just use the spending authority repeatedly?
Well, one situation, through the mayor, if I may, one situation would be that I think of as is like an open purchase order is with Mission Linen. It does have a defined amount that we can spend with Mission Linen. However, multiple departments buy from it and they get rags and towels and things like that throughout the year. So we leave that what would be called open because it's like a variety of different things that may happen through the year. If by some chance the departments go over that amount, then we would look, or if it's looking like it's going to, then we would seek additional approval. But open provides some flexibilities when there's multiple departments for pretty much small and minor purchases, which allows them to go buy an item without formally filling out something. Maybe I only need something that's a few $100s, but at the end of the day, it might come up to about $10,000 when all departments are combined together. This also provides the city with better bargaining authority for those type of purchases because we are purchasing more per se.
I mean, I think I'm specifically speaking about like HDL consultants or an attorney or, something where the bill will be $39,000 and then a month later, the spending authority is used for another, $28,000 invoice. So I'm not necessarily speaking to like smaller incidents.
Okay, so
I'm speaking to these more like large consulting invoices.
For HDL, for example, we have an agreement that defines the scope on the finance side, which would be strictly for like sales tax, business reporting, and TOT. But on the other side, for economic development, there is a separate contract because it's a different purpose. They're getting consulting services for economic development or possibly recovery from the pandemic. So there could be a purchase order there for $25,000 and a separate one for about $40,000 within finance. But finance did bring that agreement to council for approval. But just using that as an example, that would be an entirely different purpose.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Going back to the HDL example, they also have multiple different companies underneath an umbrella company that are very distinct and different. And so the professional services agreements really speak to that. You have another example that you may see from time to time with large firms like a BBK law firm. The city has used BBK law for outside purposes on a number of different projects and inquiries. And each time we've had a separate professional services agreement that defines what that use of the firm is for and the amount and usually the people involved doing the work as well. Thank you.
Councilmember McAdams, you mentioned that you had some minor edits. If you could display them on the screen, because this agenda item is specific to the code. And I recall Councilmember Pedori a while back had some edits that he put on the screen that was quite effective in council understanding what they were. If you would like us to consider them tonight, I highly recommend.
There we go. Is that showing?
Yes.
You're seeing my screen? Okay.
Yes. So if you could quickly, so the items in bold are the words that you, well, you'll need to make a motion, obviously. You're adding.
Sure. Sure. Would you like that motion now, or are there other council members that want to?
I'm not seeing any other hands up, so why don't you make that motion now?
Okay. So I move that we introduce and hold a first reading of an ordinance to amend Chapter 2.16 of the Pacific Grove Municipal Code to require quarterly reports of expenditures made under the city manager's spending authority, to include 3 edits. The first edit is under C, to add and itemized statement. The second edit is to include D and the words all purchases made under the authority of section 2.16.160 shall be accumulative per subject as per 2.16.420, splitting projects. The third edit under section 5 is to fix in accord, to add ANCE and the word with, so it would read in accordance with Article 15. And then the fourth edit is the fix that Councilmember Coletti mentioned on page 2, and that would be to add a period after section 2.16.160, and that's in the first sentence of the top page.
I'll second that. Yeah, we have some echo going on. Councilmember Pedori.
I would like to discuss the motion.
Please.
Can I ask the city attorney to comment on the edits?
I see no lack of clarity in terms of the edits, and I think that they would make the ordinance clearer for purposes of implementation.
Thank you. Can I ask a question to the city manager then? I want to know what the difference between when this was framed, when your interpretation of a written report, and what does a statement, a written report and a statement, what is the difference there? The first edit, I believe, that Councilmember McAdams had provided.
Thank you. Through the mayor, we always strive to provide something that's useful. With a report like this that's asking for financial information, it was never my intention to provide a written narrative. It was always to provide some type of breakout and detail of expenditures, because I think that's what the council was asking for. So when we propose ordinances, we often use a less is more type approach, avoiding tight specifics, but if you want to add them, it's fine. But it was always our intention to provide detail in this report.
Okay, thank you. So my suggestion is I'm good with the typographical errors, accordance, accord, etc. But for the other two, the first one, I mean, I've not even seen the written report, so I can't comment on what is missing in that report, right away. And then I don't know if adding that word statement to that report really makes the report whole or not, because I have to see the report to make that decision. And so my suggestion is for that edit, we leave it to when the report is actually generated. And if the report does not suffice, at that point, consider what else needs to be added to make that report whole. For the third edit, which I believe seems to be having a circular reference to another part of the code, that to me looks redundant. So to me, the typographical change is what I agree to at this point. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith, sorry.
That's okay. I tend to agree with Councilmember Paduri on this. I think that subdivision C of 2.16.160 is sufficient. I think that I haven't seen how it would be changed anyway. I mean, it could say a written report including an itemized statement, commas, but I mean, I don't think we need that. And then as far as the cumulative reference, I do think it's duplicative since we already have that in our code. And the way I remember looking at it on the screen, I would edit it. I would edit it a little bit and reword it if I were going to accept that particular change. So I don't necessarily agree that it's clear. And I think this is probably fine as written with those two minor typographical errors which are correctly identified.
Councilmember Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm fine with all the suggested edits, and having the city attorney say that it provides more clarity for implementation is really the driving factor behind that. I appreciate all of those who brought them up, Councilmember McAdams and Coletti. And the section C, being a circulatory or referencing, I mean, that is done from time to time in order to make sure, or sorry, it's D, to make sure that an obscure part of the code and what it's referencing is not misunderstood. And so I think it's a good idea to be as clear as possible when
Councilmember Tomlinson, I'm not hearing any audio. Am I the only one?
I couldn't hear anything, Your Honor.
Councilmember Tomlinson, you want to try it again?
Oh, did you hear nothing?
Yeah.
We heard most of it.
We heard most of it.
When did it? I don't know where I cut out other than to sum it up in that I think sometimes less is more, but in this case, I'm fine with both edits. To have the city attorney say that this provides more clarity is, for implementation, is the key factor here. So, and I also think that I heard the city manager say that, he was planning to put itemized typed information in the report anyhow. So I'm fine with the edits as they are, and hopefully my two attempts were clear to say that I support what's on the motion.
Councilmember Coletti.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think a statement and a report, adding both, in my mind, they're synonymous, but that's my interpretation. So having both stated, I don't think harms us in any way. When I made reference to the quarterly statements of all funds in the Treasury, that's mentioned in Article 19K of our charter, and it uses the word statement. So I'm fine with having both. I recognize that Councilmember McAdams is concerned about serial POs. I don't have any evidence that that's occurring necessarily, but putting it in there as a reminder, I don't think harms us either. And as City Attorney mentioned, it offers further clarification. So I would support those edits. Thank you.
Ms. Kendall, may we have a vote, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Councilmember McAdams?
Aye.
Mayor Peak?
Aye.
Council members Tomlinson?
Aye.
Berry?
No.
Was that a no?
Yes.
Thank you.
It was a no.
Thank you. Councilmember Coletti?
Aye.
Councilmember Emilio?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith?
No.
Motion carries 5-2.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item 11B, ordinance enabling promissory payment related to entitlement water and large-scale construction. Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor. This is also a follow-up item pursuant to council direction. Back in April, the City Council discussed promissory notes as they relate to entitlement water and large-scale construction. The direction provided by the council was to insert into the code the ability to offer a promissory note for large-scale construction for entitlement water. And so we return tonight with a code revision that does precisely that. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have about this. Thank you very much.
Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak to this item? We'll wait just a moment. Do we have anyone?
We do. Inga Lawrenson-Doimer, you have the floor.
Welcome.
Thank you. I know that when the city manager took it upon himself to spend $625.188 as a promissory note that nobody knew about for the Goodies project, and the public, was pretty outraged. And in this, I wouldn't exactly call it a promissory note. I mean, it's not my traditional sense of what I would call a promissory note. Yes, what the city manager did was, but not in this sense. And I just found the authorization that was tacked on as a PowerPoint, I guess, in the agenda, and it makes me feel a little bit better, but I think there's much too much room for abuse of this, and the city is not a banker. We should not be in that position. The local water project isn't self-sustainable. This is a kind of a favoritism mechanism to me that just, it doesn't pass a smell test, really. You're making steps to make it okay, but I really wouldn't call it a promissory note. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bob, you have the floor.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name's Robert Leach. I'm with West River Hotels. I just wanted to follow up and thank the council for considering this item. Large-scale projects such as a luxury hotel, is a very expensive proposition in today's modern world, between the cost of land entitlements. In the case of the PG Hotel, it's 15 years, I think, that it was spent on entitlements and costs and plans and redesigns and everything else that goes in on the front end of a project. It's very expensive. And what's kind of unique, and I'm proud to be in the hotel business because it allows us to probably provide more revenue to the city to put back into the community than any other form of business, and that we pay a transient occupancy tax, we pay sales tax. It's a great investment in the community to have a nice luxury hotel in the city. But more importantly, I think it's important to realize that it is kind of misconceived when it's called a promissory note, because really it's in our case, our water fees are about $1,279,000. And if we have the note, we pay it when we complete the project and we get ready to use the water. Otherwise, we would have to pay that up front before we even build the project. And, I think in terms of, there's very few forms of economic stimulus and economic development you can use anymore without triggering all sorts of legal questions. But this is one way that's kind of simple and basically says you pay for the water when you get ready to use the water. And I think when you understand it's a large scale project, there's millions of dollars that goes into the project even before that. So I just thank you for considering it. I know that people always kind of confuse sometimes, this type of concept that we're getting some sort of freebie. There's nothing free in this project for the developer of a major project. He's basically just deferring the cost of the water until he gets ready to actually use the water. So thank you. I appreciate you listening to me. Take care.
Thank you.
I see no other hands raised, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Coletti.
Thank you, Mayor. We spoke about this last time. We talked about the concerns of basically issuing a land use entitlement for no money up front. And I've got a problem with that. The last caller mentions that part of developing a project is acquiring all the land use entitlements. And, that is a significant cost outlay, you have to have the funds to embark on such a project. But, one of those upfront land use entitlements that the developer has to go out and get is access to water. With this proposed ordinance before us, they get access to that property right, that land use entitlement, with no money up front. And this is important to understand because it is definitely different than what the last caller characterized it as. As soon as we transfer that entitlement to the property, it runs with the land. It is a land use entitlement. It has value. In fact, they're seeking a $1.2 million worth of water. As soon as they get that entitlement for no money down, their property value just wound up by $1.2 million because they had transferred onto that property a land use entitlement that's worth $1.2 million. And furthermore, that land use entitlement allows them to go off and do development. It allows them to go to the water district to get a permit. The water district will not do that unless they have the land, have the water entitlement paperwork authorizing it from the city. And then once that water permit's issued by the water district, that comes back to the city, and then they get their building permit. So getting this water entitlement for nothing is just a subsidy based on, it's a subsidy that the people of Pacific Grove are making for certain developers. Now, when people who are building, for instance, an ADU, and they want to get some water from the local water project entitlement, they have to pay for it up front. So this idea that we're going to select a few developers to cash in and get and become subsidized by the residents of Pacific Grove to the tune of $1.2 million in this case, I think it's just outrageous. If the last caller mentioned, this is part of the development process, going out and getting land use entitlements. That means you have to pay for them. And I don't think that should definitely be the case here as well. And if someone wants our water, I'm more than happy to say, you know what, we recognize this building, this project's going to take a number of years. We'll lock you in at a price. I'm willing to do that. That's like a promise to sell. And we'll promise to sell you the water at the rate, which is currently 30% off, has a 30% reduction. We promise to sell you this water by such and such an end date. I would call that a promise to sell. I think maybe using the word promissory note confuses it a little bit. I think one of the callers mentioned that. I agree. A promissory note is basically a debt instrument. But a promise to sell is another type of animal altogether. It's basically saying you have access to this entitlement once you're ready to pay for it. But we're not going to give it to you until you are. We'll just hold it. You know, we'll put you on a list that says, yeah, we'll sell it to you for this amount of money. And that's, you know, that's worth something too, because the developer can show that to their financing people to show them that they do have water lined up, and that it'll be for a specific price and at a date certain. So I'm all for doing a promise to sell note. I am not for doing a promissory note where we give the water entitlement, the land use entitlement, to the developer without paying a cent. That is just ripping the public off. And, you know, especially when you consider that the local water project is underwater to the tune of $700,000. You know, if this developer were to say, hey, look, I'm willing to play ball. I want to build my hotel. I'll buy that water. We get a check for $1.2 million. We just pay off that $700,000 debt. $600,000 of which is a loan, an interfund loan from the local, from our sewer enterprise fund. That money needs to go back into the sewer enterprise fund. You know, it shouldn't have been taken out in the first place, in my opinion, because it's a Prop 218 fund. You should leave the money, the funds alone for their intended purpose. That's a promise to the voters of what you're going to be using that money for. And we took $600,000 from that and you know, try to bootstrap the debt over at the local water project. We've got to get that money back into the sewer enterprise as soon as possible. And that means do not be giving away our water entitlements for nothing down. And so I can't support this proposed ordinance, but I would be glad to support a promise to sell, which I think has value too. Thank you, Your Honor.
Councilmember McAdams.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I'm going to piggyback on Councilmember Coletti's comments. I mean, the whole purpose of the local water project was to bring in revenues to the city, and it hasn't done that. You know, so I agree that, you know, having the water entitlements, it does separate Pacific Grove. It is a good negotiation tool, but we're not in that position until, you know, now if the $600,000 was paid off and the local water project was maybe breaking even, I would take this into consideration, you know, and I will take this into consideration later, but not right now. I mean, the local water project is bleeding money every month. We're losing money. And so we're really not in a position to be a bank or to be floating developers. You know, the way that the ordinance is written, it's a counter transaction. It's a sale of water entitlement. And it's, I give you money and you give us the water entitlement. There is no interpreting that for a promissory note. And so, you know, it really concerns me that the ordinance was not previously followed, and that promissory notes were created by staff without input, you know, from either the council or the public. You know, if the council majority wants to move forward with this, I definitely think that we have to be clear and consistent and transparent regarding if we're having a down payment, what the fees are, what the finance charges are, because those can't be arbitrary. And really, we have a master fee schedule, and that's exactly why we have a master fee schedule, is so everybody knows what the fees are. I have a question in the ordinance under B. Does project include both commercial and residential? I'm not sure who would answer. The city attorney?
I could answer that through the mayor. This is intended only for large scale construction, which is not residential.
Okay, so then I think that needs to be clear.
Excuse me, if I may, Mr. Mayor. The way this is written, it does not distinguish. The way it's written, this allows circumstances related to a specific project. So this could apply to any project that was seeking entitlement. It would be the city's discretion as to whether the circumstances warranted the promissory note, but it does not exclude.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
However, Mr. City Attorney, we do not have large scale residential projects.
So I understand that, but that needs to be in the ordinance. And so if it's for commercial only large scale, then what is large scale? Is it over 2.5 million? Is it over a square foot? Like, I think that really needs to be called out, and it's not the way the ordinance is currently written. But, you know, for me, I am not able to support this at this time right now. In the future, if we have paid back the sewer fund, the $600,000, and this ordinance it needs to be tightened up, and the local water project is at least breaking even, then yes, I do think that this is good leverage. But right now, we desperately we need the revenue. So I am open to what Councilmember Coletti talked about, you know, sort of like a promise to purchase. But as far as like taking a lien and trying to collect money later, I think that that's putting the city in a very vulnerable position. So thank you.
Councilmember Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mayor. Are you guys hearing me?
Yes, we are.
I had a rogue AirPod connected from somebody else in my family, and they were, I don't know if you heard them or not, but sorry about that.
No, it didn't. If that happens again, I'm going to go like this.
Okay. All of a sudden I saw you talking and thought I couldn't hear you. Anyway, on this item, I'm trying to remember, but I feel like we were fairly majority, if not everybody, asking the city manager or asking the staff to put this together because it was a practice that we got, wind of was happening. And so therefore we wanted it to be written out of how it would go down. And so it makes sense that we're having a, discussion about how are we going to put this practice to best to be done to best practices. I have some questions. The act of a promissory note, I guess this would be for the city attorney. So my understanding was not that if you were given a promissory note as a developer, that you now have it recorded and therefore like the water rights recorded and then therefore would run with the land. The way Councilmember Coletti was suggesting, and I know you typically do lots of research, but can you, city attorney, speak to that on whether it's true or not?
The concept here is that the entitlement would be revocable if the promissory note was in default, and that if the promissory note is in default, there would be no occupancy allowed of the project, and therefore that the entitlement could be pulled back if the owner of the property, the owner of the project is in default and has not paid when it is due.
Okay, and that was my understanding that, so if we issue a promissory note and a developer, gets in over their head and has to bail or whatnot, they don't get to have the water entitlements. And also at the same time, if they don't pay for the water, they're never going to get occupancy. So their project will never be a success. So there's two kind of fail safes. And then I would like to put some language in there that says the promissory note specifically says transfer of ownership, this note would be null and void or something along those lines, that if there's if you're one developer is trying to get another developer to take over the project and this and that, it would have to be renegotiated, because we'd want to relook at that new developer and understand their credit rating and whether we want to issue a promissory note to that type of developer. So it has to kind of run with the original person who it was given to. So hopefully that's clear enough, but I think that kind of language would be important. I support us giving these promissory notes. I understand the local water projects underwater. I think there's other fixes that we're going to get into when we get to that meeting about how to fix that. And eventually these promissory notes will be paid also, which will, we're not giving away the water. We're delaying the day that we'll get paid for it. I also think the promissory note can lock in the price, like Councilmember Coletti said, that, if it's a 30% discount when we issue the note, then you can depend on that price. And that's what developers are looking for, that I'm going to have the water rights when all my financing comes and I'm building, and that I'm going to know what the price is. So it's not a variable in my math and that is unknown. So in order to work with developers and be friendly to them, I fully support this practice. And I guess the last thing is I do agree with the comments that we should specify commercial only and what that means, and from a size perspective, if we can put out the size as well, because probably a scenario that I can't even dream up right now, someone will apply for a promissory note, and without clarity on who we intend this to be for, it can be an inequity in a place we don't want to go. So I don't think those are very organized, but those are all my thoughts. So.
Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to move approval of the recommendation, and if there's further discussion, perhaps if I get a second, we can have discussion on the motion.
I'll second. I have amendments or all the things that I just mentioned.
I'm going to I think we need Mayor Pro Tem Smith needs a second on his motion. I'm thinking there's going to be more discussion. We haven't heard from every council member.
Yeah,
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right. Councilmember Emilio.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to echo what's been said by Councilmember Tomlinson, and I also believe that we need to look at the end result of a project that is very large. And I'm just going to use, for example, Goodies, the big project that's going on there. I'm just using that for an example. The end product is we're going to see a more vibrant downtown. We're going to see people hired where the employment has not been good. And I also support this project, this recommendation.
I also support promissory note. Let me go over a few things. I understand the reason to help, particularly for developers that have to spend large amounts of money to purchase water for their projects. And so in principle, I agree that this is a reasonable exercise to defer payment for water until they absolutely need it. But I'm also concerned about the transfer of water rights. And I will echo the comments from Mr. Laredo. The ordinance that's before us, that's proposed, has no mention of any size, large or small, any minimum or maximum water entitlement. Though we have been talking about the hotel that's been approved across the street from the library. We've already heard comments that they will need to purchase at the current price $1.2 million worth of water entitlements. Okay, so with that as a preamble, I support the promissory note, but with certain protections for the city. Councilmember Tomlinson made comments to that effect, as well as other council members, and a little bit of clarification on the language. And so if our city clerk would help me out, and I sent a one Word document. Okay. So these are the minor changes I'm suggesting to the proposed ordinance amendment. The first change is to delete conveyance agreement. Conveyance agreement is actually a water subscription agreement. I've been signing multiple water subscription agreements recently. But keep the promissory note to affect the sale of entitlement water. And then further down, delete water entitlement, just replace it with promissory note, just for clarity. And then again, for clarity, add if the promissory note is in default. So that's the protection. If payment in full is not timely made, the city shall retain authority to revoke the promissory note in part or in full if the promissory note is in default. So that protects the city, and I think other council members have heard referred to that action as well. And then the last part is clarity on who is signing off on promissory notes, and I'm suggesting the city manager on promissory notes having value of $5,000 or less, and city council approval is required for entering into promissory notes with a value in excess of $5,000. I pulled that number out of the air. And maximum one promissory note per property and buyer. So that's a I'll characterize it as a friendly amendment to the motion by Mayor Pro Tem Smith and Pedori. And as I said, I think it provides some extra protection. It doesn't, we don't give water rights away without payment. Provides some clarity and understanding of who approves it. So with that, Councilmember McAdams. And since it is a friendly amendment, I'll look to Mayor Pro Tem Smith to accept it.
Your Honor, I just have a question about, I don't think you meant to delete section subdivision C of the code. I believe you meant to add a subdivision D with respect.
Oh, yes, yes, absolutely. Sorry, I ran out of space on the page.
Okay. And
yes.
So the first in subdivision B, as I recall the screen, I don't think that I had any issue except for if you say if payment in full is not timely made, the city shall retain authority to revoke the promissory note. in part or in full. And then if you add a secondary clause that says, if it's in default, then I think you may be creating by your language two different requirements for us to revoke the prom note. So I think we might be better off just eliminating or changing the water entitlement and changing it to the promissory note. I think that's my first thought about B. I don't have any problem with eliminating some of the language that you had suggested there. And the second point that I would want to have more information about is the notion of the city manager only being able to enter into a promissory note of $5,000 or less, because I feel that perhaps that won't be something that would even ever happen, and perhaps the council would be voting on all of these things, and I don't know that I support that idea. So I think we're going to have to, I'm going to have to need some, before I accept that amendment, I'm going to have to need more information from both the city attorney and the city manager as with respect to those points.
Okay, since I called on you, let's go. So let's have the city attorney and the city manager weigh in, and in particular on the phrase, if the promissory note is in default. Does that, Mr. Laredo?
Mr. Mayor, would it be possible to put your language back up?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, what I find concerning is the striking of the word water entitlement and inserting the word promissory note, because I find it truly problematic to have the city be able to revoke a promissory note that may not have been paid in full, and then talk about the promissory note being default, because if we've revoked the promissory note, then there is no evidence of the debt. And I believe that it is important for the city to be able to revoke the water entitlement if, in fact, the note has not been paid.
Yeah. Okay.
My concept is that if the city revokes the entitlement, that water would come back to the city. There would be no occupancy permit that would rely upon that portion of the water that was not paid. And the city would be made whole by continuing to hold the water. And there is precedent with the Water Management District with respect to permits having been pulled and the Water District restoring for the city of Seaside the water that had been debited from the city's allocation when those permits were pulled. So the concept here is that if the water entitlement was revoked because of non-payment, then the city would continue to hold that water.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith, if you don't mind, I'm going to continue on that train of thought with Mr. Laredo.
Of course.
So I'm having trouble with water entitlement. And now the promissory note, a promise to sell a given amount of water at a fixed price. And I, like other council members, are comfortable with that concept. When you start talking, when you leave in the word revoke water entitlement, so we are giving water rights, or you're suggesting that this ordinance amendment would entitle the property owner and the property with water rights.
It would be a revocable water right, revocable if in fact the promissory note is not fulfilled.
And the promissory note would have a number of conditions associated with it, terms of payment and when payment is made, correct?
That's, that's correct. My contemplation was that the note would need to be paid in full at the time before the occupancy permit was granted. So until that time, you have a shell. It is not usable. The promissory note needs to be paid. And that's when the water right would vest with the property and then run with the land. But until that point, there is no ability to rely upon it for occupancy purposes.
So there is no grant deed, there is no assignment, there's no water subscription agreement granting the property owner water rights or water entitlement. Is that correct?
Whatever is signed would be revocable, and it would become non-revocable only once there is no longer an amount owing on the note. It would have to be paid in full.
Well, thank you for that explanation. I'm still quite fuzzy on this shell concept of water entitlement. I like the idea of a promissory note, but not giving water entitlement shells or otherwise. I think the second question was for the city manager, which was this item about $5,000 or less. Hearing Mr. Harvey, hearing your comments that this was intended only for large projects. Then did you have a minimum value or water amount that you had in mind, Mr. Harvey?
Well, thank you, Mayor. A couple things. There's a significant amount of staff time. We've only done one promissory note, one note period. It requires a significant amount of effort. You need to dot your I's and cross your T's, and record things properly, and make sure that the document is correct. And so, we $5,000, we would never entertain a request for a promissory note of that value. It would have to be a significant amount of money that merited the amount of effort involved. And really, we would want it to be those projects that produced a yield to the city. That's why a hotel in particular is attractive, because it yields TOT, sales tax, and a property tax increment increase. And so, you just wouldn't have that with a different type of project. I don't know if I'm answering your question. I don't have a particular value in mind, because it would really vary on a case-by-case basis, but it would certainly be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, I would think, at a minimum.
Okay. It's interesting that you bring that up. So currently, the way the ordinance is written, without this amendment, there is, as far as I can tell, no approval process. It's a ministerial action. And I get an email that says, come to City Hall and sign off on a water subscription agreement and a grant deed. And I rely on staff that tell me, yes, all the paperwork is in place and the monies have been or are about to be deposited. So there's no approval process. It's just over the counter. Now, with this amendment, without this language C, there is no approval process. It doesn't describe a minimum, a maximum, or how approval. I believe, just says the promissory notes would be signed to anyone for any amount. So that's why I put this last one in here. And like I said, I'm happy to change that $5,000 amount. But I think we need to be clear on, particularly for large projects, what does the promissory note say? What, what are the conditions involved in such promises, when, in particular, when and under what conditions payment will be made? Okay. Councilmember Podori.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a few comments here. One is typically for larger projects like the one that you're seeing in the Goodies building that was granted a promissory note, they are usually secured by what is called a deed of trust, and that's what was done. That deed of trust will have conditions that you specify. That's from what I understand, that's typical. Having to secure a promissory note by means of a deed of trust. So I think that's what happened, and I think the language in the ordinance does indicate that the promissory note was secured by a deed of trust for that particular project. If we are really looking to, there's actually a section 5 which says a promise to pay water entitlement costs can be secured by deed and also by the city's ability to withhold final occupancy permits. And so that language in turn reflects the fact that we are able to revoke the water entitlement at any given point in time. And we're also able to have a deed of trust, which will take care of items such as what you're discussing right now. So to me, that is there already within this, contained within this. So I don't think we need to add additional language. The other item over here which says city council approval is required for promissory notes with a value of excess of 5,000. To me, I mean, how many of these are there? I mean, I get it if it's like a $500,000 item, possibly city council should look into it. But if we are having everything within the ordinance to say it's going to be secured, there are revocable conditions, which means we can pull it out anytime we want. And then if you as a mayor, you're already looking into these before signing, we have everything in place there. So it seems like we're just adding on. And then finally, I don't know because I don't have experience in this, but could more than one promissory note exist for a property? I don't know. And are we kind of like confining ourselves by adding that sentence? So those are my comments. Thank you.
Councilmember McAdams.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, for me, I don't want to think what is happening. I want to know what is happening, and I want to, you know, really understand the process. And right now, we have no idea what is happening. So for the city manager, you mentioned that the first and only promissory note, you said it took a significant amount of staff time. So are those costs, is this like a full cost recovery per process? Are there fees? Are there, or is it just the city is not recouping and doing full cost recovery? What does that process look like?
Through the mayor, we've only done this one time. So there was one effort, and you know, it was our first time doing this. The thought was that the project was going to benefit the city ultimately by providing sales tax, and it was going to benefit the city by an increase in the property tax increment. And so it was worth the effort involved to put this together to allow the project to get off the ground, because without it, the project would not have. That was the thought involved. But there was no, you know, fee for a promissory note, and we did not direct bill the applicant for my time or the city attorney's time or the community development director's time. And we generally don't bill out for that type of thing unless there's a very specific reimbursement agreement like we have with the ATC project.
Okay, well, we've only done this one time. So now that you know the amount of time that was spent, is that, I mean, just a guess, how many hours do you think you all three combined spent on this? 10, 20?
I don't really know. Probably less than 10. I would think.
Okay, so I mean, is that something that the city would do? Is charge a fee for the promissory note, and also is interest charged, or this is 0% interest?
Through the mayor, the way the last promissory note was structured was there is interest only upon default because the water is not provided until it's actually being used, and it can't be used until it's actually occupied.
Okay, and then as far as like who wrote the promissory note and did the recording at the county? Is that the city attorney? He handled that part of this?
The city attorney, if I may, through the mayor, was involved in the effort and made sure the form passed city standard. But we looked to other cities that had done similar type actions prior and borrowed examples from them in order to create one for that purpose. The city attorney, of course, was involved in the creation of the document and making sure it was appropriate. The community development department ended up doing any type of recording with that document.
Okay, and is that a function that the community development department does with other items?
Through the mayor, yes. And again, I don't envision multiple instances like this. We could certainly devise an entire process, but I really think that you're probably going to get maybe one or two of these that come around for consideration. I don't know if you want to direct staff to design and implement an entire process that has all these stops and checks in it if it's one or two instances as you'll be doing this.
I mean, I absolutely want to, and we're talking about 600,000, 1.2 million, 2 million. I mean, I don't know, like we're talking about a significant amount of money. And so we absolutely should be dotting our I's and crossing our T's, and especially with, staff turnaround, et cetera. It is prudent of us to have something. I mean, I think this ordinance is maybe a good start, but if I were new to the community development department, I would not know what the process is or how we, do another one, another promissory note. So I am not able to support this as is. I think the ordinance definitely needs some tightening. I know that Councilmember Tomlinson had some suggestions. The mayor does as well. Maybe this needs to be hashed out a little more, and an edited version is brought back for approval. But this ordinance as written is not ready. Thank you.
Councilmember Coletti.
Thank you, Mayor. I think there are a lot of terms that are being used incorrectly. So I'd like to help clarify that if I could. A promissory note in this context is not a promise to sell water. It's a promise to pay a debt. I think we just need to recognize that. And typically the way you secure a debt is through a trust deed. And what position will the city have in line? Will we hold first position? Will we hold second, third, fourth, fifth, 10th? We don't know. And so when there's all this discussion about, we can revoke it, at will, and we can get all our money back or get our water back, it's kind of, it's not really well defined if you don't know where you sit in the trust deed. But I guess more importantly, what we also need to understand is what a land use entitlement is. A land use entitlement allows you to go off and develop. And what we're proposing is to give to developers a land use entitlement of water so that they can qualify for all sorts of things. Their property value instantly increases because they have received this land use entitlement. They can go off and get a water permit from the district, and then that water permit allows them to go get a building permit. That has value. It's not just like, oh, we'll get paid when you get occupancy. They're borrowing our water to go do development, our water entitlement. We're giving it to them for free. No money down. So if someone were to come up to you on the street and said, hey, council member, I heard you gave away access to our water entitlement for nothing, so so a developer could go build a hotel. Why did you do that with my water entitlement as a resident? And I would say, good question. So I've got a real problem with just doing it zero money down. Now, I do sense a will on the council to adopt this in whatever form it is at this point. But I would recommend, and I would ask to amend or make the amendment, that at least some money get paid down. 10, 20, 30% has to be paid. You can't just give away a land use entitlement for nothing. That's a dereliction of duty. I mean, I'm just adamant about this. This has value, and we're giving it away for nothing. No chance. We've got to have them pay. They've got to get some skin in the game too. Okay, it can't just be on the back of the residents. So whether that's 10, 20, 30% down, we need to figure that out. And I'm willing to make an amendment to implement something like that. Council member Tomlinson raised a good point that I'd like to ask the city attorney about, and that was whether the entitlement could be made non-transferable. Is that possible, Mr. Laredo, through the terms of the water entitlement?
You can certainly make it that there can be no transfer without the consent of the city, and that the attempt to transfer without the consent would be an act of default. So
okay,
you can do that.
Okay, that's great. So there's nothing currently in our water entitlement ordinance that would restrict that?
No.
Okay, thank you. So I would definitely endorse Councilmember Tomlinson's idea of having this non-transferable. I do believe this is a subsidy. We've got to get some money down. And, you know, if council, I don't, you know, the proposed implementation for, I think it's subsection C here, or maybe it's D, adding the whole thing of $5,000 or less, I don't think is useful. I would just like to see city council would approve entering into a promissory note. And it's really, it's more than just a promissory note. It's a promissory note, it's a trust deed, it's a water entitlement. It's a sale of a public trust. It's a sale of our water. That's what this is. And I agree with Mr. Laredo that using the terms incorrectly can really run us afoul. So I would hope that he would come back to us on second reading with any items that he feels would compromise what we're trying to accomplish here. So with that said, I would like to amend the motion to include that we pay, that the proposed purchaser of our water entitlement pays 25% down.
And Your Honor, would you like me to respond to that?
Yes, please.
So
That's definitely, yeah.
There's been an amendment proposed by Your Honor, and I would not accept that because I feel that the language is sufficient currently, and the addition of subdivision D to me is confusing. As it relates to the amendment proposed by Councilmember Coletti, I disagree with that amendment, and I won't accept that amendment.
No, I'm not. Point of order, Your Honor.
Yes.
I'm making an alternate motion to your motion to include the 25% price being paid for the water.
But I mean, that's not what I heard, but yeah.
Right. Tim Smith, right. Okay. Councilmember Coletti has a substitute motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that for discussion on the motion.
Okay.
So the substitute motion then is to Accept the
25%.
ordinance as is, but to include 25% down?
And yes, and to also make the recommendation made by Councilmember Tomlinson that a non-transferable clause be added to any promissory note and or trust deed and or water entitlement. And that the issue with voting on the issue of voting on a promissory note would come before council for any promissory note, irregardless of what the amount's for. So that
okay, great. Can you just summarize that one more time so it's clear?
Well, so I'm proposing that we adopt the proposed ordinance with no change to section B to include Mayor Peak's recommendation in section C, but only the portion that says the city council approval is required for entering into promissory notes, period. And that the recommendation by Councilmember Tomlinson, where water entitlements / trust deeds / promissory notes are non-transferable. And if anyone wants to add to that, I'm fine with it.
Perfect. So I will continue with my second. Thank you.
Councilmember Tomlinson.
I'm ready for the call of the motion of the substitute motion. I'm not going to support it because it has one piece to it that I don't, the 25% down I don't support. And then there's a piece missing, which is I'd like to add in the language for the commercial only. But I do agree with council approval, non-transferable, and so I will make another motion when the time comes to keep this manageable, if that works.
Through the mayor?
Councilmember Tomlinson, why don't you have a crack at your substitute motion?
Okay. I will move that we adopt the motion or adopt the ordinance. And I'd like to add language to be clear that this is for commercial projects and appropriate sizing. I'll leave that up to the city attorney to put into the second read. That council approval is required for all of these for approval. And then that it's not transferable. However, I'm just going to say that the fact that Councilmember Pedori pointed out in section 5, saying that it will be secured by a deed of trust, and then what exact conditions go into that deed of trust should be flexible. And that would be one of them, non-transferable, ability to revoke, blah, 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 blah. Maybe we'll even come up with more. And my understanding is the way this ordinance is written is on a case-by-case basis, we'll be able to put in those conditions in the deed of trust. And I guess I'm just going on record saying that one of the conditions I would want is the non-transferable piece. So I'm fine either way, whether we put a sentence in for that particular condition or allow it to go into the deed of trust when these are written. So I'll repeat it as is, add the commercial only and sizing, add a sentence about non-transferable, and then council approval. That's my motion.
I will second that, but I will also make a suggestion that on that thought, with that input to staff, that we continue this item to bring it back. I have questions about the deed of trust and the questions about the water shell and what that means. I think that there's a number of issues hanging out there, and I don't think it's good governance. We've got a lot of questions and we're going in at least 3 different directions tonight. I'd like to see staff to provide some clarity with the last motion, which has a lot of pieces to it. Councilmember Coletti.
Well, I was going to further complicate the motion, but it's a friendly amendment. So Councilmember Tomlinson can say yea or nay, but I would like to know if Councilmember Tomlinson's willing to add to that motion, to her motion, the requirement that 10% of the face value of the water entitlement be paid up front. So for a $1.2 million project, it's $120,000.
Me to answer?
Yes,
I honestly, Councilmember Coletti, I understand exactly what you're saying, that it does have value, but I think it is value that I can justify, putting in the hands of these developers in order to bring the business to our town. So I'm not interested in any kind of down payment for the note. So no.
Okay, thank you.
Before we go to Councilmember Emilio, I want to check, I don't have my Robert's rules handy. With Mr. Laredo, it's a motion to continue. I need a second and it's debatable, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so.
And Mr. Mayor, if I just could recap, you have a principal motion, you have a motion to amend, you have a motion to amend the amendment. There can be no more motions on the main motion. Certainly a motion to continue does take precedence, and that would be the first thing that should be discussed.
Okay, and Mayor Pro Tem Smith, did I hear you second the motion to continue? Okay, Councilmember Emilio, discussion on the motion to continue?
Mr. Mayor, if I could just add one point of scheduling. I am not going to be attending the next meeting. I will be attending the meeting thereafter. I just want you to be aware of that so that if you do choose to continue, you know that I would be able to work on any amendments in advance of your meeting on the 4th, but I will not be attending the 4th. Thank you.
Councilmember Emilio.
I don't know if, did Councilwoman Thomason get a second?
Yes, I second.
Oh, that's right, you did, okay.
Yeah.
I think we should call for the vote on that motion.
Okay, can we, what's the order? The motion to continue, is that first up or not?
That would be first up, the motion to continue unless that motion was withdrawn. If there is no continuance, then you vote on the last motion first, and then Mr. Coletti's motion, and then the original motion.
Ms. Kendall, may we have a vote, please?
Yes, sir. Mayor Peak?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith?
Aye.
Council members Emilio?
Aye.
Coletti?
Aye.
McAdams?
Aye.
Kaduri?
Aye.
And Tomlinson?
This is the vote to continue, right?
Yes.
Okay, aye. So confused.
Motion carries 7-0 to continue this item. Is there a date for the continuance, Mayor Peak?
Well, Mr. Laredo, I think, would you like to make a suggestion?
Well, either you continue to the next meeting, I would work on the proposal that would come back to you for first reading at the next meeting. Or if you feel that you would like to have me there, I will be there at your meeting of the 18th.
What is your choice?
My sense is that there may be questions that you would like me to be answering. And if you continue it to the 4th, I see a possibility that you might want to continue it thereafter. My suggestion would be to put it on the 18th directly.
All right. Let's follow the advice of our city attorney. That'd be my suggestion with a lot of good input. Appreciate it. All right, moving on to item 11C, contract amendment number 2 with Benjamin Harvey, our city manager. I'm going to speak first for our negotiating committee. I've got some slides. Ms. Kendall, if you wouldn't mind posting slides. Thank you. So this is contract amendment number 2, and with the negotiating subcommittee, Councilmember Emilio, Mayor Pro Tempore Smith, and myself. Next. And here's the timeline. April 21st, we began city manager contract negotiations. About 1 month later, we received from Ms. Livian the city manager compensation study of 10 local government agencies. A month later, we, council, gave and sent to the city manager our best and final offer, and the following week, the city manager provided feedback. Next, please. So some of the key points in this contract amendment: it eliminates remote work days, where prior it was 1 remote work day a week. It establishes office hours for the city manager here in Pacific Grove, Monday through Friday from 8 to 5 p.m. Those are the hours that City Hall is open to the public. And the contract term is changed from indefinite to 4 years from now, June 30th, 2025. Next. As I mentioned, Director Livian provided us with a compensation survey for similar positions. As city policy, we do a salary match to 95% of the median salary. And that was accomplished by taking or transferring the housing transportation reimbursement into our current salary. That was $48,000. And so the new base salary is $216,000. And also a 95% median total compensation match. And that included an increase in deferred compensation of about $17,000 for a total compensation of $274,000 annually. Next. So what we're doing now is considering for approval a resolution, and once council approves the contract as amendment through a resolution, then the city manager would approve it. And also tonight, our following agenda item is an ordinance which is required to amend the compensation. If we could go back a second. So as any ordinance, there's 2 reads. The first read is tonight. The second read will be at the next meeting on August 4th, and it becomes effective 30 days after. The next start of the first pay period is September 5th. So the contract amendment, all conditions in the contract amendment would become effective on September 5th. Next. Okay, I'll turn to Councilmember Emilio and Mayor Pro Tem Smith if they wish to speak now. Otherwise, we'll go to public comment. We'll still have a chance to talk after public comment. What is your
I have
pleasure?
no further. I wanted to thank Your Honor for the presentation, and I don't have any additional comments. I think it was pretty comprehensive.
I agree, Mayor. I also agree with Mayor Pro Tem Smith. It was very thorough.
We'll now go out for public comment.
Jane Haynes, you have the floor.
Welcome.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Jane Haynes. First, I want to thank the council negotiators for the contract amendment number 2, which eliminates the city manager's remote work days, establishes the office hours, and the other item. Second, I want to request that amendment number 2 be added to it to specify the distance from the city where Mr. Harvey may reside. The California Constitution prohibits city employees from being required to live within the city, but Article 10, Section 10B states, quote, such distance of their, that the employees may be required to reside within a reasonable and specific distance of their employment. PG faces fire dangers, increased fire dangers now, so our city manager ought to live within a reasonable distance from the city. So please specify in amendment number 2 the reasonable distance the city manager must reside. Third, and most important, contract amendment number 2 cannot be approved tonight. The Brown Act requires that an agenda be posted 72 hours in advance containing a brief description of each item of business. The agenda posted last week states contract number 2 will be discussed, but neither it nor the agenda report contains a complete copy of contract 2. Contract number 2 incorporates provisions of Mr. Harvey's 2017 contract, which include the city manager's severance pay. I spent over an hour this weekend searching the city website for the 2017 contract, and I could not find it. Its severance provision is critically important. Hypothetically speaking, suppose that Monterey City Council discovered that Monterey's city manager, Mr. Usler, had instructed staff to hide a critical fact from decision makers. I am a strong admirer of Mr. Usler, but under that hypothetical situation, I would want the Monterey City Council to discharge him immediately. Mr. Usler's contract would require Monterey, in that case, Mr. Usler's contract would require Monterey to pay him 6 months severance pay. However, Pacific Grove's contract through the 2017 contract would require Pacific Grove to pay Mr. Harvey 12 months severance pay, which is double what Monterey's contract would require. Therefore, pursuant to the Brown Act, I request that this decision be delayed until the public has 72 hours advance notice of all provisions resulting from contract amendment number 2. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last 3 numbers to the telephone number is 333. You have the floor.
Welcome.
You'll need to unmute yourself.
Looks like we'll need to move to someone else.
Lisa Ciani, you have the floor.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's really shocking that you're considering extending the city manager's contract for another 4 years. In light of his poor performance, a year-to-year contract would be appropriate. Extending the contract for 4 years says, wow, we love what you're doing. I believe the agenda report should state why council desires to continue its employment of Benjamin Harvey as city manager. Have you forgotten the community survey? The city manager has been disrespectful and unresponsive to responsible, engaged citizens throughout the community for years, and no amount of protest seems to get your attention for more than a brief moment, if that. Why do you not hold the city manager accountable for his lack of transparency and lack of respect for the community as a whole? I've written to you over and over about the long list of messes he's created. Do you have a long list of accomplishments he's responsible for? It's a shame so many people don't dare speak out publicly and share what they think of his performance, except in a confidential survey. I'll remind you again of the city manager's very low ratings on the community survey. His response was to deny the validity of the survey and give us a new website, with no recognition of his personal responsibility to respond to community concerns going forward with open, honest, transparent communication. Establishing regular office hours and a specified contract term are necessary improvements, but will they spur an improvement in performance? And I question why the agenda report shows us only the amendment rather than the entire contract. Please reconsider the proposed contract amendment to substantially reduce its duration, and please find the courage to look for a new city manager. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll try this extension once more. Extension 333, you have the floor. I think the hand went down. I see no other hands raised, Mr. Mayor. I take that back just a moment. Anthony Ciani, you have the floor.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Peak and members of the council. I take this back to when the city manager was hired. And from what I've seen and what seems to be in the record is the city manager violated the charter and the sections of the municipal code that require the city manager to, within a certain period of time, I think 60 days, reside in Pacific Grove. It appears that from the grand jury's report, about a year later after he was hired, that he was not residing in Pacific Grove, that he was commuting. It sounds like maybe he still was commuting up till recently. And that his primary residence was in Southern California, maybe Newport Beach. That's a violation. And I can tell you the number of things that he has done. I've put them in a letter to you, but I want to cite them here. He cost the city at least $100,000 on Project Bella. That money has not been repaid. Maybe the city manager should repay the money lost because of Project Bella. And the findings of the grand jury report that there was lack of due diligence, that was under his watch. He didn't do that. So the notion that you're going to reward him and all the things that's occurred since then that have been failures, you're going to reward him with a 4-year contract just does not make sense. What is the criteria that you've used? Please disclose that criteria and make it public. Show the wonderful things he's done, the qualifications that he's met per the requirements of the charter. Show those so we can all be looking at those, because we're all shareholders in this city. You're not the only people here. There's the citizens. There are the residents. And I don't think we're being looked after. So please disclose all that information. Bring this back for another time after you've disclosed that information. Do not reward bad behavior with a 4-year contract. Please find an alternative member of the broad members of the planning associations that could serve as a city manager. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Yes, Mayor. Inga Lawrenson-Dormer, you have the floor.
Welcome.
Thank you. I have absolutely no confidence or respect for this city manager's competence. He has made egregious mistake after egregious mistake and continues to do so, costing the city money. I cannot understand awarding him any contract. He should have been terminated long ago. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I see no other hands raised, Mr. Mayor.
All right, we'll end public comment. I'd like to start off. This is not exactly the contract that I wanted. And I suspect it's not exactly the contract that anyone here wanted either. But after many long, hard discussions, we have this compromise. And so I urge all my colleagues to approve it, even though there are parts of this amendment that you clearly don't like. Let's use this as proof that we can really listen to each other and do the hard work for the betterment of our community. Councilmember Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll just say a couple thoughts. I think that, my hat's off to all 7 of us and to the mayor specifically for leading the performance evaluation, which took a couple of months. And, it started by really clearly organizing how that process should be done properly, which I think for this council was, for some, a first time. For some of us, it was a second time, but this was just a way better run process, in my opinion. And it resulted in a 41-page document full of feedback back to our city manager, that he was given strengths and improvement areas and a lot to chew on and look through. So I think the result of all the time spent gave feedback on a level that our city manager deserved and was able to take on, both very positive and very, very negative. So he got all of it. That isn't something that is shareable. That personnel matters those are private documents, so that is not shareable. I think someone from the public asked for that information, and it's not something that can be shared. And then we moved on to the negotiation to go back and forth. And as the mayor alluded to, there were some compromises on all sides to come up with this contract that I think is something that all of us are able to live with. I'm particularly pleased to have the no remote work days, and the city manager is very excited, I think, as well, to be able to be working here in the city 5 days a week, is my understanding. So some great improvements in that area. And I'm also happy to get him up to 95% of median, as he works extremely hard to run our city and deserves to be compensated in that manner. So I guess just thank you to everybody on the screen here, or at least on my screen, for going back and forth for so many late days and nights and hours, and to get to this point. So I'm happy to approve this contract and the follow-on amendments and the salary changes that will come. Thank you.
Councilmember McAdams.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank my colleagues as well for their collaboration and time on both the evaluation and the contract amendment, and also to the mayor for his leadership. This was a long process, and it should be. And of course, Mayor Pro Tem Smith and Councilmember Emilio for serving on the subcommittee. You know, we had some difficult but productive dialogue, and that brought us here this evening. Just like with Councilmember Tomlinson, you know, the members of the community and even the council, you know, that frustration about the city manager working remote. You know, I'm really pleased that we were able to finally provide this clear outcome of omitting the weekly travel and the travel reimbursement and the remote work from Southern California. And that was really important to me. You know, the mayor is 100% correct in his opening statement of, you know, we're not all happy, and that is probably the right place to be. And I know for me, something else too during this process, it was really important for me that this council be in solidarity about the outcome. I didn't want to have a 4-3 vote, you know, and so it's really important, you know, that we are united in this outcome. And, you know, I think that that is really a statement to the community and also to our commitment to each other. And so thank you for going through this process and for everybody's time.
Councilmember Emilio.
Thank you, Mayor. Ditto on everything. We, all of us worked very hard on this contract. I'm ready to make a motion, your Mayor.
I see no other hands, please.
Okay, thank you. Authorize the execution.
All right, yeah, please go ahead and make the motion, and then we'll have discussion.
Okay. I'll make a motion to authorize execution of the employee contract amendment number 2 with Benjamin Harvey, City Manager.
Second.
Councilmember Coletti.
Thank you, Mayor Peak. Well, I too want to thank the council negotiators. And, you know, indeed, I want to thank everyone on council, including myself, because we did work hard to get consensus as much as possible. There were some difficult discussions that we worked our way through as regards the employee performance review. And then as far as negotiating a new amendment to the contract. And the City Council collaboratively accomplished 3 important objectives in my mind. We eliminated remote work days. We established office hours for when the city manager will be at City Hall. And finally, we added an expiration date to the employment contract where before there was none. It was an indefinite contract. So those are 3 real accomplishments, and I congratulate all of us for coming to them. And I thought long and hard about this. But, you know, in the end, any contract should consider one basic fact in my mind, and that is, are we getting competent performance from the employee? And because I believe we are not, I cannot agree to a contract with this employee. Thank you.
I'll turn to our city manager. Mr. Harvey, would you care to provide any feedback at this point before we take a vote?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I want to thank the City Council. I'm proud of what we've accomplished in the nearly past 6 years that I've been city manager. I look forward to the next 4 years, knowing that we can accomplish much together. I appreciate the terrific city staff that I have working in this organization. Without them, nothing is possible, and with them, everything is possible. So I'm very thankful for the amazing team that we have here. And I appreciate the confidence from the council to be able to continue, and I thank you very much.
Ms. Kendall, may we have a vote, please?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Emilio,
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson,
Aye.
Mayor Peak,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Coletti,
No.
Councilmember McAdams,
Aye.
Councilmember Paduri.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-1.
Thank you. I'll move on to item 11D, amend compensation for Mr. Harvey, city manager. And this was already wrapped up and explained in the prior item. And it is required to have an ordinance to amend his compensation. And since I've already gone over that just a few minutes ago, we'll now go out to public comment.
Anthony Ciani, you have the floor.
Welcome.
Thank you. Now that you've decided to continue the contract for 4 more years, hopefully we won't lose any more staff, such as losing 2 community development directors and I don't know how many members of the Public Works Department and Planning Department staff. That having been said, we lost over $100,000 on Project Bella due to the city manager's malpractice. We then spent, I don't know how many thousands of dollars to investigate that. That money is down the hole. I think those funds should be reimbursed by the city manager. So the contract for his reimbursement should include a reimbursement back to the city for the costs that he caused. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I see no other hands raised, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Council discussion on the item. Councilmember Tomlinson,
Yes, sir. I'm ready to make a motion.
please.
I move that we introduce and hold the first reading of an ordinance to amend Benjamin Harvey, city manager, salary and benefits, and direct that publication of the ordinance be specified by publication of a summary approved by the city attorney.
Second.
May we have a vote, please?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Tomlinson,
Aye.
Councilmember Emilio,
Aye.
Mayor Peak,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith,
Aye.
Council members Coletti,
No.
McAdams,
Aye.
Paduri.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-1.
Thank you. I see we've run past 8 o'clock, so let's take a 10-minute break, resuming at 8:32.
Recording stopped.
everyone a moment or two to get back. Where is it? Let's resume. Our next item is the former item 7A, Architectural Review Board membership. And that's my item. I don't have any slides. The impetus or the motivation for this item is to reduce the membership of the Architectural Review Board from 7 to 5. Currently, there are only 5 members. I didn't say it in the report, but there's not a long waiting list of folks wishing to join the ARB. The restrictions in the municipal code are fairly strict in terms of knowledge about architecture and construction. And to tell you the truth, we haven't been able to follow all those requirements for membership to date. So hence I'm recommending that we relax the requirements a bit to 2 members with architectural construction experience, and also broaden the candidate pool to include an architect that routinely does business. We have I personally know 2 architects in town, have offices in town, but don't live in Pacific Grove. They live right across the border. So it's folks like that that I'm thinking of by broadening the or loosening the residency requirement by 1. So that's my agenda report. We'll now go out for public comment. Ms. Kendall, do we have anyone wishing to speak on this item? It looks
We
like
do, Mr. Mayor. Lisa Ciani, you have the floor.
Welcome.
Thank you. How will reducing the number of Architectural Review Board members excuse me, from 7 to 5 improve the membership situation on ARB? It won't facilitate appointments. The larger membership is the standard number and actually allows more flexibility. It's reasonable to adjust the qualifications to allow membership for an architect who has worked frequently in PG, but the description in the proposed revision, quote, demonstrated architectural experience in Pacific Grove, does not seem well defined. Quote, demonstrated knowledge and experience with architectural projects in Pacific Grove would be more appropriate. Also, it's not reasonable to remove the requirement that a member of the general public shall, quote, demonstrate a special interest, competence, experience, or knowledge in architecture or building material. That's an important requirement for all members. An important factor in attracting ARB membership seems to me to be the sense of respect the board members feel from the city administration. When the city's response to a decision or recommendations by the ARB is to change the law to circumvent them, such as their recommendations regarding the ATC project in December, That certainly does not encourage the members to feel respected. The city's so-called minor clarification of the LCP implementing ordinance regarding the ATC property is a thinly veiled attempt to change the law to fit the developer's proposed project, rather than respect the ARB's evaluation of how the property fits the community's standards. Please take more time to word the ordinance revision cautiously and don't change the number of board members, which is unnecessary. And while you're making changes to the ARB, it's important to acknowledge the responsibility the city has assigned to ARB due to a flaw in the ordinance to do design review on projects for documented historic properties not currently on the HRI, but that have a phase 2 report determining that they qualify. The Boards and Commissions Handbook specifies that the Historic Resources Committee, but not ARB, should be familiar with the historic context statement and the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. ARB members, who are not expected to have historic preservation experience, are also not expected to be familiar with the basic standards. So there is not consistent and informed review of modifications to historic properties. ARB should be familiar with those documents, or preferably all review of historic properties should be done by HRC. Please look more closely at this proposed ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Inga Lawrence and Doimer, you have the floor.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm pretty much going to echo Lisa Ciani. I think it's premature to lower to 5 members. I think it is very good idea to broaden where the architects could live. And having demonstrated that they have done an architectural project in Pacific Grove is enough for me. And the other thing that's really important is I am appalled at how this council too, very much so, seems to ignore ARB recommendations and seems to foster letting developers know that, oh, never really mind, you just have to step through that hoop. No, it is a very important step and it deserves respect. So I think that keeping the numbers at 7 and broadening where they could live, yes, and giving them a little more respect and qualifications for, I mean, accepting what they actually recommend. That is what that is in essence, because they are volunteers, whether they're appointed or not. You are listening to a more qualified public when they speak and offer their recommendations. And yes, it was separated between historic properties that should be heard by the HRC. And that was a very important step that we took. And I would like that to very much continue, because it seems like the ARB is making decisions on historic properties that should rightly be in the Historical Resources Committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anthony Ciani, you have the floor.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Peak and members of the council. Holy mackerel. I'm supporting my wife's, Lisa Ciani's, advice, as well as Inga's advice. I normally don't bring this up, but I'm a licensed architect, 40 years a licensed architect. Before that, back to 1967, I've been practicing in various architectural positions for the city of San Diego, for the U.S. Coast Guard in Connecticut, and so forth. So I've had some experience at this, and I've had some experience working for and developing standards. I got a grant from the California State Historic Preservation Office to prepare a model ordinance for local coastal programs for the development in historic coastal communities. and developing architectural review standards in boards and commissions and committees. And I've never seen anything like what's going on here. I would be so demoralized. Why have I not volunteered to be on the ARB or the HRC is because it's a demoralizing position because it is not followed. It doesn't follow. It isn't given clear standards. And take, for example, the ATC project that was heard on December 15th, 2020, where the ARB gave clear, concise recommendations for the project, and that project was not followed. Those recommendations were not followed. How would you feel? You'd be demoralized. You would go like, why are we here? Why are we doing this? Who wants to join that kind of a group? Yes, it should be 7 members. You need to support those people. You need to give them the authority to do what they're doing. The ARB should not be the HRC. But if the ARB is going to be the HRC, you need to give them clear guidance, because right now all they're following is guidance for residential buildings, not commercial, not historical. So you have a lot of work to do. I think this is a good discussion. It's a beginning. Don't adopt this. Go back, look at the HRC, look at the ARB, rewrite the ordinances, and give these people some support. And yes, include some people who have lived somewhere else but work here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I see no other hands raised, Mr. Mayor.
Do we have any council discussion on this item? Councilmember Coletti.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I've got a question, and I do sympathize with some of the remarks made by Mr. and Mrs. Ciani regarding members of our boards and commissions being demoralized. And I think that's something we all have to be mindful of. But getting to the proposed ordinance, I do like the idea of allowing non-residents to participate, people who've demonstrated their architectural skills here in town, and certainly if they're practicing locally, that's a good criteria for allowing them to be a member of the ARB. I can think of someone who lives out in Carmel who would be perfect, but he practices in PG, but he lives in Carmel. So I support this, but I guess I have a question for the mayor. If we were to do this, where we would allow non-residents to be members of the ARB, do you think membership would grow at all? What's your feel on that?
Thanks for the question. Since we're limiting the membership to only one non-resident, then no.
Okay.
It won't grow.
Well, I can understand that if it's capped at 1. There's not much time to reconsider, I suppose, but I wouldn't be opposed to allowing 2 non-residents to be members. A lot of people say, why does PG have 7 council members, 7, this and that, where a lot of the other local jurisdictions just have 5. And the reason is because we've got a lot of good qualified people who, can serve and want to contribute to the community. And I want to, offer that opportunity as much as possible. So I'll just throw that out there. If we want to add, expand the non-residency provision, maybe that could help get us more qualified members, or get us, to fill it out to 7. Dealer's choice. Thank you.
Councilmember Pedori.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a question as well. I don't see anything wrong with us operating the way it is. Like, there are 5 people. It can go up to 7. 5 can actually have a decision-making process over there. So I'm comfortable with 7 as it is. The non-residency aspect, To me, it seems like the struck language, which says one member appointed from the general public shall demonstrate a special interest, competence, experience. Perhaps you can add that non-residency clause to that language itself, because demonstrated architectural experience in the city of Pacific Grove, I don't know how many will qualify there in particular, and that may actually help open it up to 7 as well. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Thank you, Your Honor. I support this as written by the mayor. I think it's a prudent maneuver. I think that we, trying to consolidate a little bit and have a little bit more streamlined appointment system and all of that. And I like this. I don't like having more than one, but I think one non-registered voter with architectural experience could be a benefit. So I wouldn't tinker with it. I would just vote to approve it as written. Thank you.
Councilmember Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mayor. And, for the last 2 years, I served as the liaison for the Architectural Review Board, or I should say for my first 2 years as council member. And then I'm not the liaison anymore. And going to all those meetings, and I know most of the callers who are on, they're listening, they also attend the meetings, but it is really a challenge for that group to understand the standards and have the clear standards. I do think we can do probably a better job in letting those standards be known and followed. It's not only good for the board to have, but it's good for anyone looking to redevelop, so they can plan to it and making that clear. And in order to improve those muddy waters, I guess, we need people with experience. And so I think loosening the resident requirement will get us that. And there were lovely folks on the ARB working their butts off for the last couple of years, but sometimes if you don't have that background or you don't have that experience, there's not a whole lot that can make up for that, right? So in this board in particular, and I'm a big fan of keeping things local, I very much support loosening this rule because it will be to the benefit of all of us if we can get actual architects with experience to sign up. So let's loosen it by one and see what it does. And then I also think decreasing it from 7 to 5 will help streamline things through and get consensus and also get training in a way. One of the things the ARB always did at the end of their meetings was additional training to understand all that is out there to deal with historic I'm talking about the Historic Resources Board, but I think the same thing about the Architect Review Board. I'm mixing my boards up. But anyway, I still think that having the experience of the architect is important, and having 5 will make it an easier process for them to be trained and to know what those standards are. Thank you.
Councilmember Coletti.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify that we are reducing it from 7 to 5. I think I heard a comment that maybe this could further expand later to 7, but my reading of the language is that it would only be limited to 5 voting members. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
So Councilmember McAdams, I was going to respond, but Councilmember McAdams, please.
I was going to make a motion. So, please. Okay, great. Oh, did you want to make your comment?
Yes,
I apologize.
Make the motion and I'll speak.
Got it. Okay, hold on. Sorry, my computer's freezing up now. I apologize. Oh, here we go. Introduce and hold a first reading of an ordinance to amend Pacific Grove Municipal Code 23.70.060 Architectural Review Board membership, and direct that publication of the ordinance will be satisfied by publication of the summary approved by the city attorney.
I'll second that. I have a comment, Mayor.
Councilmember Emilio.
Yes, I said I'll second it, but I support this. I think we also have to understand that these are volunteers, and it's great they're doing a great job. And having a group of 5 would probably work a little bit closer together. And I totally agree with this. That's why I second it.
I want to address some comments, Councilmember Coletti and Councilmember Pedori, perhaps others. There is no magic perfect solution to this, to the qualifications, or even the numbers and the residency. And I hear opinions, particularly about residents and non-residents. I hear opinions on both sides of the fence, and of course there are pros and cons for leaving 7 and dealing with the fact that we don't have enough people to fill it. So I think it's just going to continue to be a work in progress. And, please, on your committees, your experience when you see things happening with the committees that you are the liaison, please, I hope you'll feel free to share them with me so we can try to find the right place to be. Ms. Kendall, would you give us a vote, please?
Yes, sir. Councilmember McAdams?
Aye.
Councilmember Emilio?
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson?
Aye.
Councilmember Peduri?
Aye.
Councilmember Coletti?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith?
Aye.
And Mayor Peak?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. So we'll now go to unfinished and ongoing business. This is the former item 8D, the status of sales tax increase implementation options, including litigation and election. Mr. Harvey, Ms. Laredo, and Ms. Kendall. Who will speak to this one?
I'll just start. Thank you, Mayor, the City Clerk, and the City Attorney jump in. Again, this is pursuant to Council direction. Council asked us to come back and provide the various options that exist for potentially bringing the sales tax increase before the voters. So through the research of our City Clerk, you have those potential dates and estimated costs listed in the agenda report. I don't know that there's a whole lot more to add. Perhaps Ms. Kendall or Mr. Laredo would like to say something. Thank you. That's all I have.
Through the mayor, I have nothing to add. I think the report is pretty straightforward with regards to estimated costs, which is really all we can get. We can look at other costs from other elections, but it's really hard to say one way or another what we're going to be charged per registered voter of the city. So it's pretty clear cut as best as we can do. Thank you.
Laredo, would you like to?
I really have nothing to add in addition to what was in the report, but just for the members of the public, the city has filed the lawsuit against the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. That has been answered. Michael Culantuno is the lead attorney representing the city. A request has been lodged with the court to have an expedited hearing. The court rules will call for, when that matter is heard, to have it be set within 60 to 90 days. But that all things in all courts around the state are working at a snail's pace. And we're seeing it runs from the clerk's department there on to the holding of hearings. So the most I can say at this point is that we are still hopeful that we will have a litigated result before the end of this year. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we do. Inga Lawrenson-Doimer, you have the floor.
Welcome.
Thank you. I would like to ask the city manager and city attorney what happened to the dotting the I's and crossing the T's in this ordinance. It obviously wasn't done. The public was not let know for a long time, and here we are throwing cumulative amounts of money in increments to a lawyer to supposedly defend this mistake. This is no typo. The ordinance was written wrong. I suggest you put it to a vote of the people, we'll vote it in again, and we will quit losing $80,000 a month. Just get it done. Is spending more money after...
Mayor, point of order. I would request that the public use decorum to talk to staff and city council with less less of an attack tone to our staff, who doesn't set right with me.
Ms. Kendall, would you please add some time onto the clock? Okay, Ms. Dahmer, Inga, would you please resume? Do you have any further comments?
Thank you. As far as I know, this is still a democracy where you can have free speech. And I did not think the city manager brought it up as dotting an I and crossing a T. And I'm wondering what happened. I think that is a fair question to be asked. And I think it's a fair, absolute statement to say the city is wasting money trying to defend an indefensible position. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else?
I see no other hands raised, Mr. Mayor.
All right, we'll bring it back to council. Council comments, discussion, Councilmember McAdams.
Thank you, Mayor. I pulled this item. So the agenda report mentions that if the city holds a mail-in ballot-only election, that the cost would be reduced. Do we have any idea what the estimated cost of that would be?
Through the mayor, Councilmember McAdams, I believe the estimate of the voter remains the same. I think looking at a previous invoice, it would take out the cost that it takes to run the ballot places or the polling places. So it would take out the staff that's needed for that, the temporary staff that's, but I really can't say. I could not estimate exactly what that cost would be, but it definitely would take out the polling place costs. It would take out, let's see, I'm looking at transport costs, but those would be for ballot boxes. So I'm still looking at the estimated costs of I believe it's $6 to $8 per registered voter. It would just reduce some of the other costs, such as the polling places, is what all I can see that would be reduced.
Great. Thank you so much for that. For me, so I didn't support going into litigation. We were presented that it would be 3 months, and then it was maybe 6 months, and now it's the end of the year. So clearly it's not the timeline that I was expecting. And, I mean, by the time you factor in attorney's fees, plus 80 to maybe 100,000 a month in sales tax revenues that we're losing, we've already paid for the special election. And if we wait until the end of the year, we probably will, pay for 2 or 3. So and also here, if we wanted to be, do a special election date for this year for November 2nd, we have to implement a resolution no later than August 6th. Well, that's 2 weeks away. So we're missing that opportunity. So then if we skip to June into the primary versus waiting till November of 2022, time is just going to fly by. And obviously with the election, we have to, there's several steps and deadlines that need to be met. And so for me, if we, council still wants to go forward with litigation, great, go ahead. But I think that in tandem, we need to be preparing for another election. And if one comes before the other, great. But I'm not willing to, just count on this litigation because it's already not coming through. So that's where I'm at. And I also am not really understanding why this wasn't consent agenda in the first place, because this does warrant a discussion for the public and as a council. We have not really have had an open discussion. We have received, a report out or updates from the city attorney, but, we have yet to have discussion at the dais. So I would really encourage that we consider moving forward in tandem. We can still do the litigation, but also we need to be preparing for this to go to an election. And, if Colentino wants to also review the updated ordinance or help guide us so we make sure that, we're doing it correct and there will be no shortcomings, that's great. I'm happy to add that to their scope of work. But those are my thoughts, and it is the end of July. And if we want to be on a June ballot, then I'm sure, there's probably a deadline February, March, and that's just going to sneak up on us really quick. So thank you.
Councilmember Coletti.
Thank you, Mayor. Sandra, could you put up the slides I had provided that are attached to the agenda report? So I'd just like to, and can you make it full screen, please? Perfect. Thank you very much. I just wanted to provide a little bit of background so we can kind of absorb what the options are, where we've been and where we might want to go. So first off, we held an election last year, November 3rd, 2020, and we had a tax measure on the ballot, Measure L, which was a sales tax measure. It was deemed invalid by the state. My own personal belief is rightly so, and that litigation is a wasted effort. But leaving that aside, voters did vote overwhelmingly to approve it, basically 60% in favor. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there was a council vote. A majority decided to litigate. We have to date spent $23,000 of the basically $40,000 that is currently authorized. So we've spent 59% of the attorney fees that have been authorized. As Mr. Laredo mentioned, the outcome isn't certain and court delays are likely. I mean, you can just count on that. So we have a couple options other than waiting around, you know, for litigation to proceed. We could hold, so basically there are 2 election dates that we could hold for special elections. One option is November 2021. In that case, we can, as soon as possible, guarantee this or if the vote's approved, implement a $1 million per year revenue stream that we're currently missing out on. So currently $83,000 a month, basically, the city is losing or not getting, is probably more accurate, because of the deficiency in Measure L. So that being said, there is enough time to get on the November ballot, 2021. If we were to say, but that requires a special election. And there are some, you know, specific requirements through Prop 218 that require we declared a financial emergency and then get a unanimous vote of council to put the ballot measure before the people at a special election. Now, we have 2 options for holding a special election. One is November 2nd, 2021, and then the other is April 12th, 2022. June was mentioned, but that's actually not an option. Primaries are now held in April. So 2 dates for special elections, November 2nd, 2021 and April 12, 2022. If we were not to bring this before the voters at a special election, instead hold off until the general election in 2022, what that would mean is we would have lost out on $2 million in revenue. The tax, incidentally, is not collected until April 2023. And if we do put a tax measure on the ballot in November 2022, there's a potential that it would compete with another city tax measure, this being the potential, and I do say potential, cannabis tax measure. Next slide, please. So every time there's a citizen initiative or there's discussion about how much an election will cost, basically where the city is wants to kind of throw some shade on the proposition, these numbers are trotted out where it's the absolute maximum that you could ever charge for an election. And what I did in this table is I presented the cost of Pacific Grove elections going from 2012 to 2020. And they clearly show that the cost per registered voter is well below the maximums that are included in the staff report. And the election costs, of course, are as well. But we need to think about what election we're talking about. In the case of a special election, it is definitely more expensive. No one denies that. I would estimate cost per registered voter would be about $10,000. Voter turnout, unfortunately, isn't as high. But so say 80% of the voters turned out at $10 per registered voter. That's $80,000 for the election. That is 1 month's worth of revenue that we're not collecting due to Measure L not being implemented by the state of California. Now, you might ask, well, okay, so when have we ever done a special election for a tax measure? And that's an interesting question. The answer is Measure L has a companion, and that is going back to 2008 with Measure U, where voters approved a 1% increase. Measure L asked voters to increase sales tax by 0.5%. Well, back in 2008 for Measure U, that was held at a special election, and a resolution was adopted declaring a financial emergency, and council unanimously adopted an ordinance to put it, or a resolution to put that before the voters. And it passed, by the way, 65%. And there are two other examples that that are attached to the agenda report. Monterey and Carmel just last year, just last year did the same thing we tried to do with Measure L, only they put it before the voters in the April primary, or was it March? I forget what election it was, but it was last year, and they declared a special election and a financial emergency, and both those measures passed. So that table is really worth holding on to whenever you hear about election costs. I just want council to consider that there is time, and this isn't, there is time to put this before the voters, I believe, at the November 2nd, 2021 election. It would be a bit rushed. I would agree with that. But it's something we've done before. I mean, the ordinance and the resolution are not something that the city attorney has not seen before. But there's also the April 12th, 2022 date for a special election. So I would just ask council to start thinking about what they want to do. It may be too late to ask for action tonight, but I just want to provide some context, some numbers, and some thoughts for how we can start getting revenue coming in from the sales tax increase. I will say, finally, this is my final comment. If we do bring this to the April 12th election next year, it will not get implemented. The sales tax will not get implemented until October of 2022. So that's my final comment on that. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Pedori.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the comments provided by Councilwoman McAdams and Councilmember Coletti. Councilmember Coletti, thank you for that deck too. That is very helpful. I do, from my perspective, yes, we need to be forward planning. So I completely appreciate bringing this agenda item today. The agenda item is only to receive a report. So I think that's the end of it. But from a forward planning perspective, I would support an April 2022 kind of timeline for bringing this to vote because it appears from city attorney's comments that we'll have a decision by end of year. So that actually takes care of one step in the process. And so we'll have some time for the April 2022 vote. And whatever we need to do to make that April 2022 vote, we should certainly bring that to the City Council for further discussion. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tempore Smith.
Thank you. I kind of had a question for the city attorney as far as the election date. This notion of the April 12th date. I recently spoke with somebody who works in this area, and they indicated that the primaries have gone back to June. So I just wanted to get clarification if we can on that particular point.
I would have to research that. What you have here is the elections code that does tell us when that election date would be. I'm not aware that it's been amended. Certainly the registrar is the gatekeeper there. We would have ample notice before that. We need to have our materials 88 days before the election. And so if it was April or June, we would know that in no later than January or February.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That was my only question. I mean, as far as forward planning, I think, Your Honor, obviously I don't want to sit back and wait too long. If there's not a decision, if the court's not going to decide this matter I don't know, do we have an estimate through the mayor? Do we have an estimate of time on how long this litigation might take, or do we have any kind of estimate on that?
If I may, through the mayor, I talked to Mr. Coletti office just earlier this week to confirm where we are. They have the feelers out to Tax and Fee Administration to go jointly to the court asking for an expedited hearing, but that has not yet happened. And in Sacramento, they're not even allowing ex parte appearances. All requests have to be done in writing, and then there's a ruling on the writing. In Monterey County, you can actually appear ex parte by Zoom, but Sacramento has an even more truncated process. So we're up against a pandemic slowed court.
Okay, thank you. So my comment would just be, I'm in accord with Councilmember Paduri as far as if it's April or June next year, we want to get that squared away and probably proceed. If we're still stuck in this milieu of like COVID court, it seems like we're just kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. Just at this point, that's what I think. It's a pretty complicated issue though, but I can see all the points here. Thank you.
Councilmember Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Councilmember Coletti and McAdams for pulling this and the report that you prepared. When you were going through the costs as kind of an argument to, the reasons for doing this, all I could think of is it's a no-brainer. I think it absolutely, we've talked about this before, of going through the litigation, and CDTFA was something that we got behind with council majority to peruse and to try to do. And I still stand by that effort, but it's not a sure thing. And if it's already a pandemic slow, which we could have expected, and new coronavirus is coming into play, it could slow even further. So I think it's extremely prudent to be running parallel paths. And the parallel path is the election path. And that is why we're here. That is why this agenda report and all this research was done by Sandra and the city staff. So thank you for that research. So for me, the cost of putting it on the ballot absolutely outweighs, because the sooner we can get this approved, hopefully that we can, the more tax revenue can start, the sooner the tax revenue can start coming in. So the considerations I'm weighing around in my mind, and I don't know answers to the second one. The first one, I also don't know the answers to, but it was a 60-40 vote with 9,000 people participating. So the question kind of is, the $1 million question is, on November 2nd, if we were to do it this year of 2021, will it pass? And none of us can answer that question. We just will have to roll the dice and put it on a ballot and see what the voters say. So my second question is it feasible to put on November 2nd, 2021? It's July. I'd like to think it's feasible. And so my question is to the city attorney, it was written with an error. I'd like to think that the ability to have the ballot measure written with a correction is something that's been looked at and shouldn't be that heavy of a lift, because the staff report says that we would need to make this decision by August, 6th or something. So if I'm doing all the dates correctly, we would need to make this decision and approve the ordinance for it at the next meeting in 2 weeks, when our city attorney is not going to be here. But I think we should do that. I don't know how exactly, but I think that we should push to put it on the November 2nd ballot in parallel to what we're doing with CDTFA. And if we can't feasibly do it that quickly, then the very next election, whether it be April or June, is what I would support. So my question is to the city attorney on what you think is feasible.
Our office would be able to get you the materials, the resolution for a November 2021 election. What we do not have time to do is to go, as has been suggested, to Colentuno's office and ask for a peer review. I doubt that they would have time to do that. I have not asked that question, and we have not submitted this to Department of Tax and Fee Administration for pre-approval because we had not anticipated that there would be a November 2021. So those would be two steps that would be highly unlikely to be available. But in terms of our getting documents to you for action at your next meeting, that we could do.
And a follow-on question, if I may, Mayor. If we were to look at the documents, am I correct in that it would all have to be written and approved on the 4th in order to make it onto the November 2nd ballot? Or is there a little bit more in the timeline that I'm not understanding?
There is no extra time. It has to be at the next council meeting on that is your one window of opportunity. All the documents have to be received by the registrar's office, I believe on the 6th. Is that correct? Yes.
Of August.
Yes.
Okay, well, I guess with that information, I would probably suggest the April election because I don't think we want to hastily go through writing a resolution and possibly make a mistake a second time around. So I would thank you for playing out the feasibility question. And so I would support the April timeline.
Councilmember McAdams.
Thank you, Mayor. I am open to either. The template is on the CDTFA's website, and it's up there for cities to take and utilize, and you just really add your city's name and information. So, you know, I would be open to either, and I do think it would be helpful for the council to have a timeline way ahead of time versus, you know, this one meeting of window of opportunity, and this was on the consent agenda. So I would prefer that we, you know, have a calendar and really understand what is coming. So anyways, and a question, if we do, I'm sorry, pause. Regardless of which election, do we still need a unanimous vote of the council, whether it's a special election or regular election?
You need a unanimous vote for a special election. The only election for which you do not need a unanimous vote is if it's an election that council members themselves are standing for elections. So the November 2022 election, you do not need a unanimous vote. But any other election, you do need a unanimous vote to declare the emergency, financial emergency, to place it on the ballot.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So again, I would be open to either. I agree with Councilmember Tomlinson, though, like, you know, as much as it just concerns me and it's so expensive to wait any longer, I understand that patience is a virtue, and, you know, we have to get this right. So that's all. Thank you.
Councilmember Emilio.
Thank you, Mayor. Put my hand down here. Number one, I prefer to go to litigation. However, if you're starting to look at November 2nd, 2021, that is too rushed for the council to implement a resolution by no later than April 6th. And if you're looking at a cost, especially with that, the cost is approximately $150,000 to $214,000. I would propose that we go for election date to add this ballot measure to June 2022, which is a cost of approximately $6 to $8 a registered voter, and it ranges from approximately 64 to 85. So I believe we need to shoot for June 2022 primary, or if it's in April, either one. That's where I'm at.
I'll jump on the bandwagon for the April 2022, or if not that, the June vote. I think I agree. The comments I heard, let's make sure we don't make a mistake this time. So we will want to vet it through Culentano as well as CDTFA. And I agree with the comments about let's get the calendar going and let's get this measure and written and voted on well in advance. Admittedly, it probably doesn't need to be done until December, but given our track record, let's shoot for something much sooner than the end of this calendar year. So that would be my direction to staff. And thank you, Councilmember Coletti, for the research and proposal. Councilmember Coletti.
Thank you, Your Honor. I wanted to answer a couple questions. The question of whether it's April or June, it's a good question. I took the dates right from the election code, and I'll cite them here. Section 1000 and section 1400 of the California Election Code. So that's where the April 12th meeting comes from. Now, if it is in June, you know, the agenda report actually mentions direct other information be brought to council at a future meeting. I think that would be I would like to ask that staff brings to council when a special election could be held, whether it is in April or June. By my reading the election code, it's in April. But that's the first thing we should get answered. And you know, I totally agree with Councilmember Tomlinson. It sure would be nice to get this in front of the voters this year in November, but I also agree there is just not enough time to do it, and we don't want to repeat. And I mentioned this before, I'll mention it again. The CDTFA staff welcomes, in fact, it's on their website. Please send us your proposed ordinance and let us, you know, see if it passes muster. We did this in 2008. There was nothing wrong with our ordinance then. And I know there won't be a problem going forward, but CDTFA is available to actually give their thumbs up. And, you know, if that's available, I think we should do that. But I would just ask that we ask staff to find out when the next special election could be held next year. Thank you.
And I'll reinforce the question about the calendar, because I'm not sure the resolution would have to be prepared. And Mr. Laredo, would you go to CDTFA and Michael Colantuno in parallel or sequentially, or would you do that before coming to council for the resolution? So the timing, I'm unclear as to the timing. So I think that, and considering that things might take a month at a time to do each of those tasks, I think that we do need a calendar, a roadmap. Mr. Laredo, would that?
Thank you. Definitely, we would provide a roadmap to you. I believe it would be appropriate to go to CDTFA first, and I would propose that we do that during this calendar year. That way would have ample time to put this on, whether it's April. I do believe it's going to be June, but I believe that we can get an answer from CDTFA this calendar year, and then depending whether what that response is, whether or not you need to go to Mr. Colantuno as a third-party review, that would be your option at that time.
When would you think you'd be able to bring back a calendar or a roadmap?
I'm not going to be at the next meeting, but I suggest perhaps 2 meetings thereafter. The first meeting in September would probably be optimal from my perspective, keeping in mind that I'm going to be on vacation until the 18th.
Well, that sounds good to me. I don't know if any other council members have any other comments, but okay. Seeing okay, Councilmember Emilio, thumbs up, appreciate it. So I think that's our next step is first meeting in September to have a roadmap or a calendar to permit us to bring the sales tax resolution, put it on the ballot in April or possibly June of 2022. That's what I'm hearing.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And with that, it brings us to the last item on our agenda, 13A, compensation and benefits plans for department heads and non-represented management and confidential group employees. Ms. Livian has been very patient. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, great. So good evening, Mayor, council members, staff, and members of the community still remaining on the line. Tonight, I'll be presenting the compensation and benefits plans for non-represented employees. There we go. So let's start off first by identifying who are non-represented employees. Non-represented means these employees are not represented by an employee association or a union. Non-represented employees have been categorized into 2 groups, the department head group and the non-represented management and confidential group. The department head group consists of classifications that report directly to the city manager, and the non-represented management and confidential group consists of classifications that are non-represented managers in confidential positions. So our current process, so employees represented by an association have what's called a Memorandum of Understanding, or an MOU, that outlines their compensation and benefits. No MOU or guidelines exist for non-represented employees. Administration has been processing compensation and benefits for non-represented employees by aligning their compensation and benefits with the Management Employees Association MOU for the department head group and non-represented management group, and aligning the non-exempt confidential employees with the General Employees Association's MOU. And while this has been a mechanism to process pay and benefits for a non-represented group, it really hasn't been a best practice. So it is proposed that these 2 groups have their own compensation and benefits plan to outline their compensation and benefits. Providing each of these groups with their own compensation and benefits plan is not only a better practice, but it will also assist the city with internal and external audits. In creating the compensation and benefits plan for both groups, each plan generally mirrors the MEA MOU. However, there's 2 additional provisions that have been added. A cell phone monthly stipend of $50 for use of a personal cell phone in lieu of receiving a city-issued cell phone for business, and a severance pay option of up to 4 weeks of pay for involuntary terminations with a signed hold harmless release agreement. Other than those 2 items, there's no significant differences between the compensation and benefits plan for these groups and the MEA MOU. So with that, in conclusion, staff is asking council to approve a resolution to adopt these compensation and benefit plans for the non-represented employees. And this concludes my report.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on this item?
I do not see any hands raised at the moment.
Do we have any council discussion? Councilmember Pedori.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm ready to make the motion if everybody's on this.
Please.
So I move that we adopt a resolution establishing a compensation benefits plan for department heads and compensation and benefits plan for non-representative management and confidential group employees.
Second.
I just wanted to add for the viewers tonight that this was an item that council discussed in closed session. So the lack of conversation does not mean that we're eyes are glazed. We've all seen this before. So without any further council discussion, Ms. Kendall, may we have a vote, please?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Peduri?
Aye.
Councilmember Emilio?
Aye.
Mayor Peak?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith?
Aye.
Council members Coletti?
Aye.
McAdams? Councilmember McAdams? Councilmember Tomlinson?
Aye.
Councilmember McAdams? I have a vote of 601 with Councilmember McAdams absent for this vote.
Yes, thank you. And that finishes our agenda for this evening. Thanks to everyone from the public, staff, and council for participating. Everyone have a good evening. Meeting adjourned.
Everyone.